A couple things. One, I wanted to say thanks for hanging in there. It's been an action-packed day, that's for sure. Two, I will make sure that we budget a little bit of time at the end because we want to make sure that you all have an opportunity to ask some questions. And then we'll wrap it up with some final thoughts from the panel members. Dustin, I'm going to start with you. And this is an age-old issue. It's a challenge I know you've been facing and trying to get your arms around it, both you and Rob. And that's this age-old issue about technical debt, right? Every CIO incorporates and adopts some technical debt that you're trying to work through. And there's this delicate balance of trying to move forward and deliver capability and then have to make sure you're managing your current environment, your legacy environment, let's call it, and making sure all that stays secure, right, from the top to the bottom. Can you walk us through the thought process and how that's going?
Not fast enough. It is, like you said, challenging. By the way, good afternoon, everyone. I usually will say something along those lines early on, and I apologize. Yeah, so legacy applications, modern applications, from OCIO's perspective, we're trying to treat them all the same and give them the care, love, and feeding that they need to ensure that our officers and agents have a secure and reliable platform, regardless of the device or where they're at. There are inherent risks with a lot of the legacy applications that we're trying to address, but step one in doing that is really understanding and identifying what technologies and applications we have out in our ecosystems. So recently we came out with a Shadow IT memo where we're trying to identify and catalog all of our IT. And then from there, we're working with the program offices to understand, what's the future for the application? Will it be sunsetted with new capabilities that we have coming online through our other platforms, or do we really have to sustain this? And in which case, we'll work with them to really modernize the application to ensure that it meets cybersecurity compliance. We are trying to limit the number of custom applications that we have coming into our infrastructure. So where possible, we're going to try to point them to existing platforms and infrastructures. But our requirements all start with the programs. And if you're out there talking to the programs, which I encourage you to do, but do it with partnership of OCIO, understand that we're trying to consolidate our applications. We're in platforms. We're trying to continue to deliver reliable applications, and we're trying to standardize across the board. So just work with us as you bring ideas to bear. We're open to hearing them, and we want to hear them, but sometimes we have limiting factors that we're thinking about not only today, but in the future.
Thank you very much for that. Weigh in here, please. We know who's doing the heavy lifting.
I always do. When my boss is here, I've got to jump in as well. And, from a security perspective, one of the things when we look at our legacy applications, sometimes we say, hey, we got to fix them, but we don't always have to fix them. So a lot of these have vulnerabilities to them. So one of the things that we weigh often is, hey, what's the cost to get these legacy apps fixed versus what are some of the compensating controls that we can put in place? So sometimes if it's working and it's getting the job done, you just leave it as is and you invest in other areas until you can kind of swing back around and maybe solve some of those vulnerabilities.
Yeah, sort of invest your way out of that. So I appreciate that. And a good old wrapper seems to work sometimes, right?
Yeah.
I appreciate that. Thomas, I appreciate you coming out here. And we know that the deputy CISOs are the ones doing the heavy lifting. And I think about CBP, it's this freaking aircraft carrier out there. A lot of moving parts around, a lot of IoT, et cetera. And you've got this sort of position of originally of sort of this passive, right? We're gonna try to keep this environment stabilized, and now you're really into more sophisticated instrumentation, really active metering, and just how does one go from that sort of stable environment to really getting aggressive and getting in front of these adversaries and putting yourself in a position where you can do that properly and keep the mission running?
Yeah, well, thank you for the question, and thank you all for being here. So I think the biggest thing is changing the mindset from that reactive approach. We're going to have our security operations. We're going to set triggers. We're going to set tripwires. We're going to set alerting, and we're just going to wait for something to happen into a more proactive mindset. So it's working with our forward-thinking cyber threat intelligence teams, finding what the adversaries are doing, and then positioning ourselves as an organization in order to be prepared when they use those tactics, techniques, and procedures to attack against us. One of the things we did early on with our cyber threat intelligence program was identify goals and priorities that were very specific to the organization. So we're looking at actors that are interested in our actual mission, and we're looking at how they can actually impact our mission. And then we're communicating that from the cyber threat intelligence team, from our SOC, through our SOC, up to leadership to make sure that they are aware of these actors and the capabilities. But then as we're doing that, we're taking a proactive approach to go out and look for these actors within our environment. Because the way that we've seen things happen over the past couple of years, it's not if you're breached, it's when you're breached and how can you find them. We have a cyber threat hunt team that actively goes out and searches for campaigns. We find the different techniques that these specific actors are doing. We find the different indicators of compromise, and then we span across the network. We look at the different high value assets that we have to identify if we see any of those techniques being executed within those areas. And then we validate. The thing that comes from threat hunting that is kind of challenging is it's a negative. You can't really prove a negative. Oh, we didn't see anybody in the environment. We're taking this proactive approach, but we didn't find anything. So what do? What we've done to caveat that is we find configuration flaws. We find things that are going on in the actual environment that adversaries would be able to take advantage of. And then we report on those. We work with the system teams. We work with the different individuals within the organization to make sure that they can fix the actual vulnerabilities within the systems prior to an adversary being able to attack them and being able to exploit them. So it's really shifting that culture from, hey, we're going to sit back and wait, to we're going to actively go out, find the adversary. We're going to actively go out, find what they're doing, and then we're going to take action against that, and then enabling the organization to follow along with us as we do that. To take preventative actions prior to being exploited.
And no doubt with some sophisticated instrumentation that you're doing there. So we really appreciate you sort of laying the framework out as to describing that, I don't want to say offensive posture because that doesn't sound right, but, you know, being in a situation where you're getting out in front of it. Chris, and this is not meant to be pull a pin out and roll a grenade across, but I think these type of questions are important here. And this is about, you know, the biggest thing the federal government fundamentally misunderstands, right? Misunderstands in your eyes, and, you know, you can speak on behalf of the industry about commercial providers and how they manage cyber risk in the new national strategy. You know, what's your perspective of that?
So getting to speak for the entire industry, apparently,
Yeah.
and representing the entire federal government's position, I guess I'll be a little broad with this answer. I feel, first of all, thanks for having me here as well. A little bit fish out of water. I'm a Department of Defense, Department of War guy, so the DHS stuff is not my forte. But you did use the word aircraft carrier at one point, naval officer, so I'll use some of these moving forward. So having been just in the Department of War, you know, as the CISO for the Department of the Navy and then the principal cyber advisor, you know, looking at these levels, things from the much higher level. And one of the things I've always felt bad for all the CIOs and all the CISOs is at the end of the day, you know, it's an enablement function to whatever your core business is, right? At the end of the day, it's not the core function of any of our organizations to provide an information system. It's something that we all depend on. So in the Navy, you know, all our big dollars go to aircraft carriers and munition consumptions and the Columbia-class submarine or the things the Marine Corps are trying to do. IT, cybersecurity, all of those things are things that sort of get what's left over, right? And a lot of times those become bill payers for things that we've got to go do in the Navy. And I'm sure that exists, that same problem exists in each of your organizations. So what is industry's perspective on this? Now, I say this next piece to be somewhat controversial. There are reporters in the room. Don't get me in trouble. You know, when I would talk about the Department of War, I'd say, what's our core mission? And fundamentally, the Department of War exists for two reasons. It's to deliver lethality or prevent lethality being delivered on us. I mean, that fundamentally is what the Department of War does. So what's industry's core mission? And I would say, well, industry's core mission is to find people with money and make that money your money, right? And I would imagine most people in this room represent industry. And I would say and some of you have come from government, right? And now have done the job, and now you're on the industry side, which we will all end there one day. Eventually, you'll transition from that side to this side. And the question is, so it's this interesting perpetual cycle that we play. of trying to come up with a product or a service that is something that you can get the attention of. But what I think the government has realized is in very few instances, everything the government uses comes from industry. You know, again, I'll use the Navy as an example. The Navy does not make anything. They buy everything, shoelaces, munitions, ships, fuel, all of that comes from industry. And a lot of the workforce that enables that, particularly in the DC, comes from the contractor side. So when you say is what is industry's biggest thing that government doesn't understand is, well, industry's in this to ultimately make money. I mean, it sounds cold, but I mean, you could say it's cold mission of why does ICE exist? Why does Customs and Border Protection exist? Why does the Navy exist? And those are sort of the games that we play. But acknowledging that, I think, is important, because when it comes to some of the capabilities that the government's looking for, we're going to get into, you know, answer the question you want to answer, right, is sort of the thing. As more requirements comes into industry to build things that are more secure, particularly the last panel talking about mythos, well, there's a cost associated with that. And I would always make the example, you know, the reason an Arleigh Burke destroyer costs $3 billion is not to make it float, right? It's to keep it floating when somebody's trying to put a weapon in it. That's why it costs $3 billion, because I can go buy a merchant ship and put a missile launcher on it at a much reduced cost. But to make something, and really the conversation we get in all of these systems is when you want to move something from being secure to resilient, and the new word is survivable. If I have a dedicated, sophisticated, well-resourced adversary trying to apply their table, you know, against my problem set, well, how do I go to build something that is now survivable and then have government recognize the cost associated with that? Because the government doesn't balk because a destroyer costs it's $3.5 billion now. That's why it costs that. And I think you could take that and apply it against a lot of different mission sets in the government. And it's that acknowledgement back and forth, I think, is where the conversation gets a little more interesting.
Appreciate that perspective, Rob. I'm going to toss it over to you. You know, I think about the level of activity in regards to data being collected, these various remote locations, right? Very sensitive data, biometrics data, et cetera, very sophisticated equipment. And I'm curious to know, you know, as you're securing that environment, right, to make sure that it's protected, you know, what's the balance about, I'll say, over securing it to the point where the officer can't do their damn job, right? You know, so tell me about how that works and how that is working and what you might be thinking about to make that even better, particularly as you start talking about this mobile environment, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and it's something that we're challenged with every day. I used to say, you know, how do I protect my network? But actually now I'm saying, how do I continuously assess, you know, device trust? How do I trust an identity or validate an identity? And then how do I protect data that's everywhere? And so what we've done is, like most people with our zero trust journey, of course, most are aware, we've moved away from that perimeter security model. But really what we're focused on now is more of that data and identity security model, and focused on both the data and identity. So what we've done is we started to push down a couple things we've done. So we started to push down security to the data level. So what we're looking at here is, you know, data classification labels, DLP, attribute-based security control.
On the mobile devices.
Well, not there yet on the mobile devices.
Okay.
Yeah, on the mobile devices.
Maybe there's an opportunity out there.
Yeah, there.
Okay. Sorry about that. Go ahead.
So on the endpoint devices, on our mobile devices, we do have like MDM,
Sure.
mobile device management. We have our EDR capabilities. Something that we're really pushing now is to continuously assess our device posture. So looking at patch levels and seeing, hey, should we allow this device on the network, or should they have these capabilities? And then the other thing that we're doing, I know that AI has been a big topic here, specifically Mythos, and some of the concerns there. We're pushing patches, more automating patching at this point, not testing as much, or at least we're headed in that direction to say, how can we get out patching quicker? And then finally, when we look across the board, we see moving forward, identity is really going to be the cornerstone of our security program. So this is focusing on things like multi-factor authentication, risk-based authentication, policies specific to devices that we need to set. Really what we're trying to do, Luke, is we're trying to move away from saying, hey, the reliance on the network, the trust on the network, and move away from having to trust that location of the network and pushing it down to the data
Yeah,
itself.
because it's the network, it's sort of you're everywhere now, so to speak, from a mobile perspective. So you really you kind of got to get away from that guard gates and locks type of phenomenon. So we really appreciate that. Dustin, we've talked about some levels of sophistication around some of this technology that you're trying to insert and do it very quickly, as you, I think, started out there trying to get it done as fast as you can. And I know that you're interested in some of these non-traditional, we'll call them, methods of acquiring goods and services. And I know there's been a lot of conversation, at least I think there has been, with your acquisition shop. You want to talk about that, maybe tease the audience on some of these things that you're thinking about in regards to some of these non-traditional ways of acquiring goods and services? Don't want to put words in your mouth. Maybe it's just doing what you do today, but do it a lot faster. But
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that is one of our big challenges right now, is trying to work with industry and figure out the complex engine of acquisition for government. I'm preaching to the choir. I used to sit on your side, so I suffered your pain in going through the government acquisition process. I'm doubling down now because I'm sitting on this side and I want to see things done faster. The 18 months, 24 months acquisition cycle is just entirely too long. The technology changes before we even get it out into the operations. So what we're trying to do is work with industry to come up with different acquisition models, more IDIQs, smaller task orders that are delivery based on a specific function or capability set. Proof of value, proof of concept are going to be, I think, game changers for us as we start to look more towards proving capabilities before we even start that acquisition capability. That way we know what we're going to get and at the end of that, and also just do more of agile type development on services and capabilities. We're not looking at developing that larger application and keeping everyone on board, staffing up and for 18 months. It's just, that's not there. We'd rather bring small work groups in, get a completed get a task issued, get them on, get it done, and then start managing the application from that point forward. Of course, all the while talking about DevSecOps. So hopefully that goes without saying. Rob is, I don't want him to kill me later for not mentioning security operations, but yeah. So just to put a cap on that, it takes a lot of partnership. And for those of you that have heard me in panels talk before, one of the things I always harp on is how much of a reliance I put on the partnership with industry, and that takes open and honest communication. We don't want to say no to ideas, so we want to hear them and just talk through some of the concepts and ideas that you have. So please, let's just sit down, have a cup of coffee and talk about it, and let's see where it goes from there. I'm always open for those type of communication, those conversations.
OTAs and CBERs, is that kind of conversation going on in the building? Is there a desire to do that, an appetite, or is
OTAs not so much right now.
Time being.
We lost our cyber authority for a few months. We've
Yeah.
recently got it back, and
Yeah.
so we're trying to figure out. We're working with OAQ to see how we can best leverage that. That's definitely back on the table.
Looking forward to hearing more about that. That's for sure. Tom, you're a big proponent of software by design. So was the prior director of CISA, right? And I always felt like when I was in service, right, we would have some really sophisticated vendors in there doing sophisticated work for us. Something wouldn't go right. And I just didn't feel real good about it. Saying we got them in there, we paid them a lot of money to do this, and it seems like now we're paying them in here to fix it. What's going on here? And I know you've done a lot of work with CCARM. So give us some lessons learned, what you found out about, what's the drive behind that? What is it? And how can we keep making that better so that we get way to the left of this issue?
Yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned the term CCARM. So what that is, it's cyber acquisition risk management. What we've done is we've tried to integrate the cybersecurity component that we have with the acquisition side of the house so that we're starting to talk about cyber during the mission needs phase. When they're starting to define what we need for the mission, we're there with them talking about cybersecurity. And what we intend to do and what we have done with that is start to get the program managers to think about that, starting to get our industry partners to understand, hey, these are the requirements that we have from a cyber perspective. So they're already baked into the products, because what we've seen a lot of is, again, we get so far down the road and then the requirements just aren't there. And from the cybersecurity side, we're the no guys. Oh, you can't do that because it doesn't have cyber baked in yet. So just take a step back. If we're there from the beginning, we define the requirements. We say, this is what you need to do in order to be successful in this environment, to be able to deploy whatever it is that you're building, to be able to acquire whatever it is you're acquiring. This is how you do it. This is what we can do with you in order to get you there. That's what we've started doing. And then holding their hands and walking with them through that process. So understanding not just from the cyber side, but also building out the threats, right? What are the threats to this specific mission set? What are the threats that we need to be aware of? So as they're building this, it's not just being built to be cyber secure, it's being built to be cyber resilient. So that we know when we get it there, we've considered what these different actors can do. We've considered the vulnerabilities that we need to account for. And we are trying to get one step ahead so that when we actually deploy into production, we're not deploying something that's full of holes and having to fall back and start patching and start nailing things on after the fact, because we were there and considering it with them from the beginning. And that's something that has been very successful with the different programs. And honestly, it's also helped us to identify shadow IT within the organization, because we're tapped in to the actual acquisition lifecycle from the cyber side. But also being able to work with our invent teams and other teams that are trying to deploy things quickly, being able to understand or have them understand what those requirements are early on in the acquisition lifecycle, so we don't go out and purchase something, get the ability to start moving forward with something that just won't work in the end. So I think that's been really successful for us. And again, the biggest thing is just being able to integrate with the programs as they start looking at the mission needs, what they're actually going to procure, what is going to go through the acquisition lifecycle, and what they're going to end up with in the end state.
And do you feel like you're getting the right cooperation? You've got a bunch of industry folks here. Have they gotten the message? Obviously, you're delivering it today. But do you feel like you're getting the right cooperation from them? Is there anything is there an ask out there for them to make sure you fulfill the things that you're trying to do here in this effort?
The biggest thing is just the collaboration and having that understanding and working with us to make sure that we can get you to where you need to be successful with us. Because ultimately, you're the ones that are going to make us successful in the end. And we want to be able to provide the requirements. We want you to be able to use those requirements to further what you're doing, so that when you bring it to us, it's something that we can use, we can provide out, we can give it out to our mission stakeholders, and they can take it and field it. Because if you don't do that, we're going to end up saying no when you try to field it with our program managers, and that's going to wind up not being good for anybody. So just really that collaboration and working with us to ensure that you're integrating what you need to, that you're securing the way you need to, and then we can move forward.
Excellent. Dave, how much time we got? 10, 15? Okay, good. Just trying to time box this. All right, Chris, for you. We used to talk about the metaphor of, I've got, refrigerator's got internet access now. Now I got a toaster, it's got AI capability in it, right? But we think about some of the basics that the federal government is doing in regards to AI. There's some level of sophistication. I was super impressed by the green room conversation we had earlier. But there's still a lot of potential to unlock, right, in regards to the federal government and the use of AI. What's the barrier there? What's your sense about what's it going to take to get to from where we are today to just fully realizing the power and capability of this technology?
So you ended with power and capability. I am not an AI expert. I was a history major in college. I failed calculus my freshman year, so I wanted to graduate. But I think that the realization of the AI discussion, I think we probably talked a little bit in the last panel, is taking it from a history major's perspective. We as a race of humanoids have always gotten really good at taking a technology and weaponizing it. There's been no technology we've ever touched that we haven't figured out how to do something less than desirable with it. I think this technology is no different. We're in the process of debating that now, but it's going to happen. And if it's not done by us, it's going to be done by somebody else. So the question is, how do we begin to recognize that? Now, something else we were talking about is the training that goes around this. Well, AI is changing everything. right? I mean, it really is. And it's to the point where, even the requirements discussion, some of these things, we don't know the requirements until, after the fact. So it's just the nature of the environment that we live in right now. From a training perspective, how to use these sort of things, one of the things that I think industry has been trying to work with government a little bit more on is there's so many, there's the saying that there's 600,000 open cybersecurity jobs, something like that. The number changes every day, give or take. But then there's a lot of, students coming around out of college that can't find jobs.
Bingo.
So, okay, well,
Why
why
is
is
that?
that?
With the US Cyber Challenge.
Right. And and I think one of the things that the government needs to sort of concede a little bit for industry is say, maybe every new contract, we're going to put people, 10% allowed of them, 10% of the workforce is allowed to come in with zero experience. Because we have to
love
get it
that
from
idea.
somewhere. Well, and it's funny, again, using from the military's perspective, and I think the military specializes in taking people with no experience and turning them into something that is proficient at something, right? Pilots, submariners, whatever. And then what happens is 5 years later, we wonder why we can't keep our workforce inside the Navy, because you are now 5 to 10 years experience. You are absolutely at the sweet spot for industry to come grab you and triple your salary. So how do we change that? And why is it impossible for the new kid coming out of college that can't find a job because they don't have, where do you get that 5 years of experience? Well, there's got to be some kind of give and take in that. I'm combining a lot of things together, but the AI thing with that, with the fact that maybe AI enables people to come in with very little experience, it's going to help them do their job or their work role a little more proficiently because there's sort of training wheels that they have that can enable them to go do it. But I think the thing that scares me the most about the technology is, you look at AI from three fundamentals. There's the whole killer robots, right, that we're all worried about. There's the how it finds vulnerabilities and weaponizes those faster. And then I think there's this whole other, that AI just from I guess we'll call it the deep fake world, right? The way that it can, the cognitive side of what AI is going to be able to do to shape behavior. And do we begin to wield that as a lever of national power? You could argue that China's doing it right now with things like TikTok, right? They understand how to sort of get into play the long game to go and sort of manipulate a whole generation of folks through this new tool that is very addictive, that just leads to more scrolling. And there's so many of those conversations you can bring together. I'm sorry, I'm going down a rabbit hole. I don't even know, what was the question again? Because I can talk about AI all day long.
No, I think you got it.
Yeah.
And speaking, staying on the AI train, sort of. Rob, I'm going to come over to you. ICE SOC, widely recognized as one of the more sophisticated SOCs in the department, I'd say, right? Certainly up there in the top tier. And you guys are doing quite a bit of work in regards to, again, trying to stay away from the offensive word, if you will, or offense, I'll say, versus, being very forward thinking in regards to how you operate and, trying to protect from the adversaries, recognizing the fact that they now have, fully realized AI, weapons in the chamber, et cetera, and perhaps your use of AI to counter that, et cetera. Tell us about how all that's going and what's the thought process today? What's the vision tomorrow?
Yeah. Well, we're not using AI right yet to counter it, but what we are doing, for example, we're removing our reliance just on like signature-based detection. So one thing we're doing, and there's still huge value to that, but when you look at AI can evade a lot of those signatures. They're aware of it. So, or they're aware of it. So what we're moving towards is more of a behavior-based threat model, where we're looking, and I said the word earlier, but we're focused more on identity. So what we're looking at is anything, authentication patterns. So anything that may stand out. We're looking at privileged access and user access and anything that might look like an anomaly there. So again, and I'll be brief here, Luke, because I know we don't have as much time, and I know you got another questions that you want to get through, but
no, we're doing good.
We're very focused on that identity piece. And one more piece to it, Thomas earlier said to kind of move away from a proactive to a reactive model. And so we've kind of got to get away from that thought of, we detect something, then we respond, and then we fix it. We've got to get to that model where we're predicting, we're hunting, and then we're detecting. So we've got to be more proactive than reactive, because when we're reacting, it's already there. We got to get it before it's there.
You feel like you have the right tools, and are the tools available in the community and industry to to perform at that level that you're describing?
So I think it's maturing in this
Okay.
area.
Right.
It's really about, getting those threat hunting teams together.
Uh-huh.
But there are a number of tools that we've invested in. But like Dustin said, we're always open to, and our path is to do POVs and look at those products that can provide us the best capability.
And you're always looking for more talent, right? I
Absolutely.
know that's a big one as well. I got two loaded questions, fully loaded for the audience, and for the panel members here, and then we'll jump to the audience. And one is just, I'm going to pick on Dustin here, but anyone can chime in. Let's just talk about major incident, right? We're the alarm has shot up. It's a interagency type of whopper, right? And you've got to start communicating across the various components, across other parts of the interagency with the private sector. In the perfect world, what does that look like? And where do we need to improve there so that we're not just doing the good old phone tag and 50 people on a conference call, that kind of thing?
The smart side of me says step back and let Rob handle it. But
And that's fine too, right? Yeah.
From my experience, a good CIO has a better DCIO. That used to be the CISO, knows where all the bones are buried. But ideally, in my experience in dealing with cyber threats in the past, C2 really relies on the communication piece predominantly. If you don't have good communication with your operators who are conducting the threat hunt and the analysis, or you don't have good communications with your lateral partners, that being the other components in DHS, you're doing nothing but wasting time and spinning your wheels. As a community, I think we can do a better job in collaborating the information that we have on incidents, what our responses are, how we're managing them. IOCs, all the tradecraft buzzwords. We have to do a better job. We are getting there and we are getting better.
Is that dashboard flow, is that working better than it did in the past?
We're
It's
starting
reflecting your
this-
CDM information and.
We're
piping it up to the
standardizing tool
mothership?
sets.
All right.
Step one.
Okay.
And then we're going to start sharing a lot of the data sets into dashboards so that we can have that larger enterprise picture. So yes, that's where I was going with it. Thanks, Luke, for stealing my thunder. Dashboards.
Okay, right. Well, I'm even thinking about, the Mr. Duffy dashboard, right? Maybe we could find him in the green room and say, how's that dashboard going, right? Because I'm thinking even as at an interagency level, right, where, it's hitting the fan, it's a solar winds kind of play, right? And sort of the look there. It sounds like that's moving in the right direction. Let me break here for a minute. We got 10 minutes left. I got a couple more juicy questions that I may ask, but I want you all to be able to have an opportunity to ask some questions. Fire away here. Whoa, don't rush the stage here. Wait for the microphone. Right here behind you.
Thank you so much for your time today, panel. I'm
You are?
I'm Chris with Leidos. This is for Dustin and Rob here. You guys talked a little bit about the SOC. Are there specific tools that you're really happy with? And if not, are there certain gaps that you're looking to fill this next go round?
Yeah, so I'll jump in really quick and I'll say, yeah, there are tools that we're happy with. I'll keep it broad. But we do have gaps. We do have things that we want to grow. So we talked a little bit about.
Yeah, maybe what your functional gaps are without getting into tools, right?
Yeah.
Because obviously he's got some active activities going on there, right? So.
Yeah, and exactly. I mean, I think, well, if you look at it from a functional perspective, the detection piece, we want to grow a little bit more. We think AI can help us there. And so I think that's where industry can come and provide some value and how we can do that. AI is great at providing you numbers, but we've got to make it work a little bit harder for us and provide us some more value. So we're looking at some creativity in those areas. But the tech.
Any other functional areas that need a little bit more capability in them going forward?
Do you have any thoughts on that? Detection.
CBP as well?
I would say AI is one of the largest areas, and it's one of the largest areas that we're concerned about, and just that general, and with leveraging it in both an offensive and defensive capability, because that's where we see a lot of the gap is how do we make sure, and I heard them touch on it with the last panel, is how do you make sure that the systems that are coming in are going to meet the needs, because everything is so new and so evolving that as we evaluate these tools, one of the things that Rob and Dustin both said is that we need to do POCs, we need to do POVs to make sure that these are doing what we expect them to do and that they're performing at a level that we need them to for our organizations. I think that's one of the key things that we're looking at as we look at those different types of things to fill those gaps is what can we implement quickly and leverage in order to prove value for the organization so that we can look to move forward with them if it does.
Had another question here.
Hey, my name is Rohan Oswal from Trellix. This is a question for you, Rob. You mentioned that ICE is moving closer to data, identity, and device posture. So my question was really around as DHS is, really consolidating around IT. How much authority do the components still have to shape those capabilities as it relates to mission-specific requirements?
You stole one of my juicy questions because I'm dying to hear the answer to this one.
Well, of course, we still have councils. So we have the CISO Council and the CIO Council, and we come together there and we talk quite a bit about some of our challenges and some of the things that we need to work on, some of the gaps and some of the capabilities we have. So for example, if we need an API gateway tool, we might say, hey, we're testing this out. We're looking at these two products. And so, hey, we're using these products. So we do have a huge say in some of the direction that we're going with as far as some of the tool sets and other things that we're using. And it starts at the CISO and the CIO Council, and then we work our way through there. So we're doing communication was a big thing we talked about earlier, and that's what's going on.
So there is the ability, I know there's a lot of work going on with this tool rationalization, which makes perfect sense. But there is a level of autonomy that is allowed and useful for when it's time to have a little bit of autonomy as needed, right?
Well,
You're going to work with the mothership, try to make it all work, but it's not going to be just an absolute peanut butter spread, one size fits all.
Well, we like to be on board with the headquarters,
Of
but
course.
there are opportunities to go in different
Yeah.
directions for different needs. We have different mission sets. And so as a result of that, we do have different needs. So there is some autonomy to go in different directions.
I just want to say that there's a lot of opportunity for the components to stay independent of the headquarters.
Yeah.
However, there are very clear and strategic goals that Antoine McCord has put out for us to
Yeah.
align to. And I think it's important for the components and for the taxpayers for us to go in this direction. Identity, platform, some level of cybersecurity services. And there are other platforms, licensing that we're going after. Those things are obvious wins, and we want to stay in alignment with headquarters. So CIOs, CISOs talk on a reoccurring basis through forums, making sure that the decisions that we're making not only align to headquarters, but to the components as well, because they may have a better idea of doing it. We don't want to repeat some of the
And I think
experience.
Antoine's done a nice job of really pulling you together as you described, right? So that, you're very much involved in tool rationalization. It's not being delivered to you. You're as a community coming together to look at, what makes sense for the greater good, as opposed to eat your peas and, get over it kind of thing, which I think is the smart play there, right? Other questions? Here's one.
Hi, Tony Serrano from MANTECH. I had a question for Mr. Thorne and Mr. Getz. This industry term, single pane of glass, right? With all the constraints with acquisitions and licensing, but at the same time, all the platform modernization and combining all these different platforms together. Do you think that's still a realistic goal, or even possible to have a true single pane of glass for operations and for monitoring?
No,
Yeah, that was my first thought. No.
no, but you have to
But-
strive towards something, all right? You can't, if we start to collectively say we need a single pane of glass, we may get 50% there and still have a better position than when we started. So that's euphoria, and we all try to go towards euphoria. But the reality is, if you, again, just get 50% there, I think that's close enough for a victory. Unless you had something more.
One last question,
I think that's.
and then I'm going to let these guys give their final thoughts over here.
Hi, thank you guys so much for your time today. My name is David Gentili with Everpure, formerly Pure Storage. And my question is directed towards Dustin, Rob, and wanted to just kind of identify a couple initiatives that you might have, but, specifically around the topics that we explored today. We talked a lot about, critical infrastructure, identifying attacks before they happen, and utilizing AI. And ICE and CBP are not only law enforcement agencies, but they're massive data enterprises, probably combined one of the largest in the world. So what are you doing today to identify that data? Because, part of cybersecurity is understanding your data, what's in that data, who's accessing that data, where that data lives, because there are a lot of, data silos in the two agencies with disparate, maybe not talking to each other. So, how are you kind of doing that data inventory on a mass scale, whether it's in the cloud, on-prem, at the edge, and how are you, putting governance around that to, ensure that that data is safe and that you're increasing your cyber resiliency?
Take first step.
And I'd like CBP to take a crack at this as well. So maybe even start with CBP.
Yeah, we can start over here. So we work very closely with our chief data officer from the cybersecurity side. We tied directly in with her as she's working with the different components within CBP to identify where that data lives. And then we leverage that and work with her in order to make sure we have the correct security in place through those processes to make sure that the data is being tagged, that we're able to categorize it, that we're able to put protection in place where it exists and where it's coming from, and then where it's going to. And that's the larger picture. What we're trying to do is where does all it come from, but then where is it all going to, and is it going to be protected at that same level there? So it's really a collaboration between different groups, specifically with our chief data officers.
Yeah, and for ICE, we are, can't remember what we're now calling it. You'd probably heard me reference it as data lake in the prior.
Elise or something.
Yeah, so we're moving towards the data fabric data mesh, where we're trying to leave data at point of origin, but registering it within the larger data fabric for consumption. There are some benefits to doing that. First and foremost is going to be cost, right? And if we try to push out some cumbersome data architecture, put the costs on the application owners to re-engineer into enforce cybersecurity, it's just going to break. It won't happen. They won't do it. It's too costly. So the idea of a vendor specific across the department that provides that data mesh data fabric layer, and then consuming products within that architecture is the best way that I think we're going to go. To your earlier question, though, data discovery is going to be a pain. It's going to be hard for us to wrap our arms around the data because they haven't traditionally registered all of the data products. So we brought on a new CDO. Our old one was phenomenal. We've got another one that's going to come in and also help in identifying it, coming up with a strategy and a data identification. And it's partnership. And again, I have to say that 5 more times: partnership, partnership, partnership.
Quick closing thoughts. Chris, we're going to start with you.
Partnership is important. The questions in the audience were the ones that we would anticipate, right? They're the good ones. Help me figure out how to help you. And then, the money and the resources behind it to close those deals, but not an easy game that we play. So good luck to everybody.
Thomas.
I'll say it's an evolving landscape. We've seen a lot of new technologies with AI coming into the picture. Things are moving faster than ever. So traditionally, government does not move as fast as industry, which is why we are dependent on industry to come in and help us, to support us to get to where we need to be. So we really are looking forward to further collaboration and making sure that we can achieve our mission with your support.
Dustin.
Chris had mentioned earlier about bringing in lower level folks with no experience to try to groom them. I think that is a golden opportunity for industry and government to partner on to figure that out. If we can start growing experience from the very basic elements and growing them into what the government needs and corporate needs, I think that's a win-win situation. The reason the government doesn't do that is because you guys charge us for it. So for a fixed price, it is.
We would be lower. We would lower the prices of those. Yeah, trust me.
But I wholeheartedly agree with that.
Yeah.
And that's investing in our future. And we need to take steps in doing that now.
Give me some ideas with the cyber challenge. Rob, take us home.
Yeah, so that scares me a little bit because I love that idea too, and I was going to say something about it, but Dustin just stole my thunder there a little bit. But 10%, I think that was a good start to get folks in there. You heard me talk about identity, and you heard me talk about needing to secure the data, push security down there. We're looking for industry to come in, tell us how we can do that better, what tools or what capabilities we can put in place. Looking for creativity. AI is going to be key for us. We're very focused on operationalizing AI, so love ideas.
Want to thank the esteemed folks here at HSDF for putting on such a fantastic program today and for this panel to wrap it up. Really do appreciate it. Thank you, folks.
Oh, sorry, Luke, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I just want to thank this panel and all of our speakers on today's program. Let's give everyone one more big round of applause.